arrested for the attempted assassination of Russ Vought, Donald Trump's OMB director. He feared that this country was devolving into fascism, that Trump signified a fascist takeover, and he must do something about it. He was stopped, thankfully. But what we've seen in Minnesota, what we are seeing at the political level, the arrest of Donald Trump several times, attempted assassinations on Trump, let alone the arrests, the killing of Charlie Kirk, and even threats against individuals like myself and many others, are indicative of, you know it, civil war. I got an article for you from Zero Hedge in which they said it's time to start recognizing Civil War 2.0 has begun, with Elon Musk saying, yep. Well, we've got this story for you. First, to give you the hard details, but then go through a bit of what we're seeing across this country in terms of what is happening politically. Of course, an attempted assassination takes the spotlight, but the argument then remains, is this Civil War 2.0? And most of you know my position. I'm not entirely sure we're actually in one, though I talk about it quite a bit. I don't know, because we won't know until history looks back and decides when it actually began. But the point that I often bring up with the American Civil War 1.0 is that even after the Battle of Fort Sumter, in fact, even after the first Battle of Bull Run, the people of this country did not call it a civil war. Now, what we're seeing in Minnesota is much more like a civil strife period, notably Bleeding Kansas. Conflict between different factions on the ground and fighting between the state and federal authorities is more indicative of a civil strife period, which, for those that don't know, Bleeding Kansas, they called it, lasted 7 years. Then you got a new election. Abraham Lincoln's election triggered fears and secession. And then when he got in, he said, I'm dropping the boot. Donald Trump is already in office and has showed us that he is unwilling to put the boot down. So I don't believe that Donald Trump is a Lincoln figure. I don't. And it remains to be seen if J.D. Vance will be or what will happen. Just because it happened before doesn't mean it'll happen again the exact same way. And maybe tomorrow Trump wakes up and says it's time for the boot. I suppose we'll see. Before we get started, my friends, talking about all this, make sure you check out castbrew.com and buy some coffee, because it's good coffee. And when you buy it, you support the show. And I know there is always, I love pointing out the sheer absurdity of me being like, the country may be on fire, the world could be ending, but buy coffee while you still can. Well, maybe then you want to buy a lot, because you never know if you're going to be able to get it once things get really bad. And you know, the important thing to understand is that when it comes to these things, it's gradually then suddenly. That is, every day we see a new grain of sand added to the heap, but when will people stop and say, it hath begun? That's the terrifying question. Because that's when people start panicking. And when you panic, the gears that run the machine get jammed up. Castbrew.com to support the show. Make sure you go to timcast.com and join our Discord community, where you can get the exclusive behind-the-scenes call-in show access, as well as with your Rumble Premium membership, Monday through Thursday. I was going to say Friday, Thursday, 10 p.m. For the Timcast IRL after show. But as a Discord member, it is 24/7, all day, every day. Check it out. We're going to start here. Man faces attempted murder charge after allegedly targeting OMB director Russ Vought at his home. Now, I highlight CNN because we love CNN, right? But let's go to CBS, who gives a little bit more context. Maryland man facing attempted murder charges after showing up at OMB director Russell Vaught's home. I love that they called him the Maryland man. A Maryland man who said he feared that President Trump's re-election would lead to a fascist takeover is facing attempted murder charges after he showed up at the office of Management and Budget Director Russell Vaught's Northern Virginia home wearing a surgical mask and gloves, according to court documents and sources familiar with the matter. Colin DeMarco, 26, was arrested on January 22nd by Arlington County Police on several criminal charges. Court records show he is due to appear in court on February 23rd. During the course of the investigation, agents with the U.S. Marshals Service also discovered that DeMarco had previously claimed to be writing a manifesto, and they had also drafted a series of notes detailing everything from a weapons stash to a body disposal guide. The court records show that DeMarco is accused of plotting to murder a victim with the initials RV, who, according to the criminal complaint, had served as a presidential appointee. The complaint adds the alleged victim was involved in the creation of Project 2025. a project funded by the Conservative Heritage Foundation to produce a policy agenda for the next GOP administration. It called for a radical reshaping of the government in ways that consolidate power in the executive branch. Sources familiar with the case separately confirmed to CBS News that DeMarco's alleged target was Vaught. A spokesperson for OMB said in a statement, "We are grateful for the work of law enforcement to keep Director Vaught and his family safe." A person who answered the phone for Arlington Public Defender's Office said DeMarco had retained counsel but declined to provide any further details. Vaught has generated intense controversy because of his lead role in mass firings of federal government employees during Mr. Trump's second administration. He is the architect of Schedule F, a regulatory plan that would reclassify thousands of workers to make it easier to remove them. In private speeches he made before Mr. Trump took office, Vaught said he wanted to put career civil servants in trauma. Indeed. Now, CNN does not mention the fascist takeover. They do mention that CBS was the first to report this. There we go. They mentioned in December the DOJ charged a man for allegedly sending a threatening text message to presidential envoy and Kennedy Center President Richard Grenell. My friends, it's getting worse every single day. Okay, I don't want it to be getting worse. I don't know what to tell you. You can tell me that I'm crazy, I'm wrong. You can say, Tim, stop, you're blackpilling, whatever. What am I supposed to do when I wake up and they're like, oh, there was another assassination attempt by a leftist wackaloon who thinks fascists are taking over? This is what is happening before our eyes, my friends. I don't know what else to say. Now, we've got this video report. This is MRC. We're going to play this direct report. Election Wizard has the video and give you some more context.
Out to that alarming arrest of a man accused of plotting to murder a member of President Trump's cabinet. Let's get straight to Kelly O'Donnell, who's tracking this one for us. Kelly, the suspect allegedly showed up at this top Trump official's house.
And there's camera evidence. Tom, this is another example of the high risk of threats made against public officials. The official in this case has a powerful job in the Trump cabinet as the director of the Office of Management and Budget, Russell Vought. Officials say a Maryland man, 26-year-old Colin DeMarco, is charged with attempted first-degree murder after he allegedly was spotted on a doorbell-type camera at Vaught's Northern Virginia home. DeMarco was also allegedly carrying a firearm without a license and wearing a mask. According to a law enforcement source familiar with the criminal complaint, DeMarco was described as being frustrated with President Trump being elected. That suspect is due in court February 23rd. Tom?
Indeed. Now we have this from Zero Hedge, my friends. It's time to accept that Civil War 2.0 has already started. Perhaps it has indeed. Well, what say you, Sir Elon Musk? He said, feels like it. Feels like it? Yeah. We got a post from X. It's time to accept that Civil War II has already started. They say, I don't know who Tyler Durden is. I mean, I know who Tyler Durden is from Fight Club, but not Zero Hedge. In July of 1917, as the fires of World War I raged across Europe, the Russian city of Petrograd was facing its own special turmoil in the form of a large-scale Bolshevik insurgency. Up to 500,000 protesters, agitators, and provocateurs had entered the city from across the country, many of them armed. It took over large swaths of the metropolis, hijacked private vehicles, and confiscated private buildings. Some Soviet leaders, including Vladimir Lenin, called the event premature and did not publicly endorse it, which may have been a calculated attempt to avoid direct blowback. The official historical explanation is that the insurrection had taken on a life of its own. But the stage had been set, and the communist agitators got exactly what they wanted, what their strategy demanded: human sacrifice. Clashes with government authorities led to hundreds of protester deaths and a handful of police casualties. The Russian government surged military forces into the region to arrest Bolshevik captains, and the movement had to pull back. In the end, though, the primary goal of its insurgents had been achieved. Whether spontaneous or planned, the point of the communist methodology is always to trigger government violence, which can then be used to create public sympathy and bolster the revolution. The majority of normies don't need to join the revolution. They just have to be convinced to stay out of the way. And that's largely what happened a few months later in October 1917, when the Red Terror began. What followed was 5 years of civil war. The communists, who had long claimed to be innocent victims of the Tsarist imperialism, went on a murder spree. As soon as they solidified their political power, their ideological opponents were systematically rounded up and eliminated. There are no exact numbers on how many killings occurred because records were destroyed. But estimates suggest the revolutionaries and secret police arrested and executed around 1 million political dissidents in the first few years of communist rule. This genocide, though, would pale in comparison to the 10 million deaths caused by the Russian Civil War, not to mention the imprisonment and mass murder of millions of Christians by the atheist regime over the course of the next couple of decades. History rarely repeats, but our modern political dynamic rings rather familiar. Many of the tactics used by the leftists in Russia in the early 20th century are being used today in the US. In fact, I would argue they're almost exactly the same, and that a Bolshevik-style revolution is happening right now. Interestingly, the Bolsheviks were a tiny minority of the Russian population. At their peak in 1917, they had only 400,000 official members. They were supported politically by an estimated 23% of the population, but that is still a small movement compared to the 150 million Russian citizens trying to live their lives from day to day. Had Russian conservatives, nationalists, Christians, and defenders of private property rights stood up and acted en masse to stop the Bolsheviks early in 1917, their society could have avoided the full-scale murder that would befall them from 1918 onward. They might not have aligned perfectly with their existing government, but the communist alternative was so much worse. There's a quote from a famous communist, I think referring to the Bolshevik Revolution, I could be wrong, where they said, someone asked, what could have been done to stop this? And they said, if they just crushed us with violence. The issue is, good, honest people don't want to do that. They want to be reasonable. They want to avoid confrontation. But communists, they're ideologically driven with religious zeal, and they will do whatever it takes. They said instead the conservatives waited until the agents of the Cheka were at their doorstep, and by that time it was too late to effectively fight back. As Alexander Solzhenitsyn depressingly noted in his book, The Gulag Archipelago, the majority of Russians stood against Soviet rule, but they did not have the courage to take up arms when it mattered most. And so, a minority of militant communists were able to dominate a nation of hundreds of millions. As Solzhenitsyn warned, we didn't love freedom enough, and even more, we had no awareness of the real situation. We purely and simply deserved everything that happened afterwards. Well, that is merciless, I tell you what. The communists, of course, did not achieve such success alone. As scholar Anthony Sutton outlined with ample evidence in his book, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, they enjoyed the financial and logistical backing of various global elites, from the Rockefellers to the Morgans to the Harrimans. Through the course of the revolution and after their rise to power, the purpose? To create the model for an atheist and relativistic authoritarian state, a system that the globalists intend to one day use to take over the entire world. Their plan relies heavily on a lack of action by patriots. It could be a weakness, but the leftists have good reason to feel emboldened lately. Civil War II has, in fact, already kicked off in the form of a well-funded far-left insurrection, much like what happened in 1917 Russia. Which is why I said, and I say it again, Trump, stand down or suit up. Because every time he gives these people video evidence of federal agents acting a fool, this is how they recruit. It's how you get normies to put out messages of support, and then they fear if they speak out against these psychotic cultists, they will face the brunt of the violence. It's what they tried in the 2010s. We backed them off, and they are trying to come back now. They say the lack of conservative organization and response has been less than impressive, and I'm here to give a warning. We are approaching the point of no return, and it's exactly what I said a week or two ago, that the right does not have any organization, and they sit in their houses on a pile of guns gloating about how if we ever had a civil war, we'd crush these lefties because they're weak. But they're organized. I'm reminded of, what is that movie, Ants? Is it Ants or A Bug's Life? I don't know, the same movie basically. The one where the grasshoppers are oppressing the ants. And then there's that one scene where they're like, who cares? The grasshopper goes, it's just one little ant. And then he says, let me explain to you. And then he's like, one seed, right? He throws it at him. And then he dumps the whole thing on him and he goes, that's what happens when they all pile on you. This is what the right fundamentally does not understand. That you might have 2 million wackaloon, frail, garbage lefties. They're out of shape, they're obese, they don't have guns. But you have not a single fighter. And what I mean by that is, obviously I'm exaggerating, I'm being hyperbolic. The right has no organization. If you go into Minnesota right now, someone gets on a radio and flags your vehicle and it goes to their network where they have checkpoints and they have law enforcement, de facto leftist insurgent law enforcement, stalking vehicles and pulling people over. The right does not have anything like that. So what happens? In the event of any kind of actual civil war breaking out, the right's going to be like, well, they can't come to my house. They don't need to. They're going to take the stockpiles first, the fortifications next, the armored vehicles. Then they're going to be driving around in uniforms, and you're going to be like, who am I but by myself, incapable of fighting back, indeed, because communication was always the most important component of any conflict. That's why they played drums and blew their horns. That's why radio is so powerful. Activists are funded by a massive shell game of NGOs hidden behind other NGOs. They are coordinated by hidden online Discord servers. They receive their orders and share information in the field through encrypted signal chats. They are trained in agitation and disruption by anonymous online meetups run by covert activist coordinators. They have engaged in violent attacks on ICE and hundreds, if not thousands of occasions, and few of them are ever prosecuted. This is not the behavior of a grassroots protest movement. It's the behavior of an army of covert operatives with special protections, indeed. It's important to understand that these protests are actually a highly coordinated guerrilla campaign. These are not sincere citizens exercising their civil rights. For now, their stated motivation is to stop deportations of illegal immigrants. But this is just an excuse for their insurgency. If ICE stopped operations tomorrow, the paid activists would simply fabricate another rationale for tearing the country apart. Placating them will accomplish nothing. They are hostile combatants trying to assert dominance and grow their numbers through posturing. Their goal is the destruction of the Western world, and this cannot be allowed. The clear solution would be for the government to shut down hostile NGOs. However, these institutions are protected by corporate personhood and have the same constitutional rights as individual citizens. The process of investigating them and prosecuting them takes time we don't have. Even if Trump utilized the Insurrection Act and deployed the military, there are not enough troops to lock down more than a handful of U.S. cities. Those people hoping martial law will resolve the issue are kidding themselves. By extension, leftists stand to gain greater support. Martial law would represent proof to the rest of the world that the administration is indeed fascist. And also understand something Ian on Tim Castellanos brought up quite a bit. Should this actually devolve into factional conflict, foreign countries will intervene on behalf of their ideological allies. The course of the war will not depend on the government intervention, so don't hold your breath. Everything will be decided by regular conservatives. If they organize in large numbers, if they create a funding apparatus to move people and supplies around the country quickly, and if they form proper leadership and training guidelines, then there might be a chance for peace simply by presenting a formidable deterrent. If not, at least the means to put down the insurgency will be available. If conservatives stay at home and refuse to protect any piece of territory beyond their front gate, they will lose everything. It's inevitable. The side that wants to win will always have an edge over the side that just wants to be left alone. And you need only look to the Confederacy. After the first Battle of Bull Run, they said, "Hooray, we did it." And the North has learned their lesson. And the North didn't. Abraham Lincoln said, "It's on." The theory is, if the Confederacy, after they defeated the Union, marched onto D.C. because they were in Manassas, not very far away, they could have taken the capital and then used that as leverage to negotiate a surrender and avoid the war. Instead, they said, "We just want to be left alone." So what happened? Lincoln said, "F the Constitution, the Union will stand, war it is." So here's where we're going. Zero Hedge goes on to say, in the end, the fate of the U.S. and Western civilization stands on the precarious shoulders of a conservative movement that has the means to fight, but not necessarily the will. They are forever waiting for the perfect Hollywood scenario in which they can defend themselves in good conscience in a fair fight, where there are clear and undeniable good guy, where they are. They are forever waiting for the perfect moment to rise up, a moment that will never come. Patriots have also planned and trained for decades under the pretenses that conservatives would be the insurgents, not the counterinsurgency. Counterinsurgency is much more difficult and requires far more resources, but guess what? You don't always get to choose the wars you fight. Sometimes the war chooses you, and you have to adapt. There are certainly individuals who will do what they can. I will be among them, as will many of the people I know. But the great question, the great unknown, the unpredictable factor is whether or not average Americans will step off their porches in large numbers and send a clear message they will no longer tolerate the chaos. Trump has addressed comments from Tim Walz when he said, "Is this Fort Sumter?" Minnesota being the beginning of a new civil war. Well, what I will tell you, my friends, conservatives are disorganized. And as anyone knows, let's think about any video game. For those that are not familiar with Warcraft or StarCraft or any one of these video games, there's something called Zerging. And Zerging is a reference to, in StarCraft, the way the game works. We can use Warcraft or Command & Conquer, these top-down games. The way the games work, for those that aren't familiar, is that you start off with your main base, a worker, and a soldier. Typically, that's how the games go. The worker can acquire resources, and then once you have a certain amount of resources, your worker can then build a new structure. Warcraft being a better example for me, because I played it a lot more. So you start off with relatively nothing, and then you train more peasants to do the work, and you have foot soldiers who can fight and defend you. Well, eventually you build more buildings, you build Mage's Tower and archery and barracks. Your soldiers are stronger, they're faster, they're better, you got better technology. And then you build up this massively advanced base, and then you send out warships and zeppelins to go bomb your enemy's base. That's right. Firepower, strength, technological advancement, those were the keys to winning. Nope. The truth is, zerging was always the way you won. What does that mean? Instead of spending any amount of time having the best weapons and building up your base to the highest level imaginable, you just build a couple little small foot soldier barracks and just spam foot soldier, over and over and over again. And then what do you do? You spend all your resources making rudimentary, low-level soldiers. They're not very good in a fight, but you got thousands of them. And you send them all in a constant line straight at the enemy base to just bash the walls with swords ineffectively. And we call that this is the Soviet method. It's what they did in World War II. Instead of making great tanks, they made really awful tanks and then just send mass wave after wave of their own men and tank into the enemy front lines until they wore them down. So here's what conservatives are doing. Conservatives are imagining that they're sitting in their house and they've got a Barrett M82A and they're like, I got a 50 cal. I got a SIG. And what are they going to do about it? And what happens? 30 rapscallion lefties with no real weapons surround your house, and you by yourself are like, how do I fend off a mob? You can't. No, you can't. Sorry. There are going to be people say, yeah, I'd like to see a mob come on my house when I have a rifle. And your house is surrounded. Are you by yourself going to defend the entirety of your home in every direction? Then they break in, then they steal your weapons, and then where it goes from there is obvious. More importantly, what happens when, with limited weaponry, 30 far-left extremists just surround your property and you can't leave? And they say, we have supply lines because of our communications. We call it mutual aid. You can't leave and are running out of food. Good luck. Communication is everything. And if you're sitting in your house waiting for something else to happen, they're going to come to you. Now, Trump has reacted to Tim Walz's remarks. And let's close that window out. What to know? It's a physical assault, Walz explained. It's an armed force assaulting that's killing my constituents, my citizens. When confronted with Walz's comments, Trump asked, the governor said that? Well, does he know what Fort Sumter was, or do you think somebody wrote it out for him? I was elected on law and order. I was elected on strong border. We had a border that allowed 25 million people to come in. Many were murderers. They murdered people. We had all these things. I was elected on law and order. I was elected on the economy. I was elected on a lot of things. Because when I took over, we inherited a mess, Trump said, calling these people paid insurrectionists and agitators. The people want law and order. Indeed. Well, take a look at this video. AOC caught red-handed, says Gunther Eagleman. She's been exposed helping to plan and coordinate training sessions to obstruct ICE operations. Let it be known, never denied, Democrats have been in on this from the get-go. Okay, so you can sit back and you can say, we're good. Democratic politicians are aiding and abetting the insurgency. So what? Recently, the man who plotted to kill Donald Trump in 2024 at his golf course has been sentenced to life. How are we here at a point where we're dealing with all of these attempted assassinations? We have this from Newsweek. Trump's slopaganda sinks to a new low, just like his polling. It's always negative. It's always negative. Well, my friends, let's take it to the next level. Certainly, one might talk about perhaps street fighting, and others would argue, listen, whether or not a bunch of wackaloon protesters fight cops has nothing to do with civil war. Well, I'd only implore you to read about literally any other civil war, but sure, let's roll with it. How about this? Virginia Democrats release congressional redistricting map. Trump started it. Virginia is going to finish it. The new map eliminates all but one Republican seat. The current map has, it's got 5 Republicans and it's got 6 Democrats. The new map, I don't know if they have an image of it, would have only 1 Republican seat. Democrats, we have to the current map, the proposed map. Virginia Department of Elections, interactive map of voting districts and precincts. And, okay, this is a terrible link. They want to get rid of all of them. We said 10-1 and we meant it. The proposed map would affect Virginia's 11 congressional districts, making it 10-1 Democrat. That means there's no election. No longer for the House will there be a meaningful election by which individuals choose who they think represents their voice. They are just going to create maps where Republicans make up 40 to 50% of the state, but don't have any representation. And so where do you think that leads us? Then you have this. Washington Democrats propose bill to let people vote online. Now you won't even be able to track or prove who actually voted because one guy's computer can vote for everybody. That was one of the biggest problems with the ballot harvesting issue. One thing I think conservatives overlooked and couldn't actually prove. So they send universal mail-in votes to every house. Typically, young people don't vote. So what happens? Wackaloon lefty mom who hates Trump sees 5 mail-in ballots come in for her and for the rest of her family, and a couple things happen. We heard a story about someone on The View voting on behalf of her child. And then she later denied, no, but it sounded like she did. And no one ever investigated it, huh? Who was it? Was it Sonny Hostin who did that? I can't be sure. So here's my theory, is that, 50-year-old mom, wackaloon liberal, sees the mail-in votes, and then one of two things happens. She fills out the ballot for her kids and sends it in because she knows I'm not going to vote. Or she says, we're not leaving until you guys fill out your mail-in ballots. And they go, Mom, I don't care. And she's like, just fill it out. Vote for Biden. Just fill it out. And they go, okay, fine, whatever. And they fill it out. And then here we are. The young people never actually cared to vote, but they got the vote through universal mail-in voting. And they called it democracy. I don't. When people don't know what they're voting for, it's not democracy. What you're doing is you're taking a bunch of dumb people and tricking them into selling away their rights. That's why I think there needs to be restrictions on voting. It should be substantially more difficult in order to vote. We have this. Ed Hu, serial ICE terrorizer, finally arrested. Indeed. We'll play this video for you. I hate vertical videos, but that's just the way it is. Here's the arrest.
They put the gun on him. What's the reason? What's the reason? What's the reason?
They tried to kill me. They had 8 guns on me. They ran into me. They tried to kill me.
They tried to kill me.
Call the chief right now because I need an incident commander. I'm the citizen I'm requesting.
I'm a political representative. I have my campaign. It's a political target.
You have a thing. I don't want to lose eyes on him. Can you please use your thing? I would like an incident commander. Can you please call one?
Okay, we have 2 officers that are more senior.
So why are you guys taking him?
I love how they're always like, can I speak to your manager? It's like, it's a cop lady.
Who is that incident commander? Okay.
Who is the incident?
Why are you taking him?
I'm telling you there's an incident.
Okay. Why are you taking him? I haven't seen you guys all the way back there.
Yeah, they know they've been harassed.
So why are you taking? What's the reason for his arrest? He saw us trying to do our investigation, and there's days that he put targets saying to kill me on Facebook. That's him. And the moment he saw it was me, he tried to hit me with the car. So let's be real. When did he hit you? I was.
Whoa, man, this is just nuts. So here they are arresting a guy saying they're trying to kill me, and she's saying he threatened to kill her and then tried ramming her. Man, where we are as a country, my friends. Man charged with attempted murder after targeting Trump. It looked like he's crying. We're cooked. We're cooked. This was in Virginia. So what do you do? So what do we do? This is where it's going, my friends. And this is why for the past month and a half, actually gone on 2 months, we've not been there. In the first week of December, I believe it was, someone drove by our property and fired multiple shots. We've only ever released the audio, and the principal reason is because the security camera footage reveals points of entrance and egress, as well as the location of our security cameras. Considering someone shot at us, we played the audio, we released it on the show, and so for all the people that are whining about it, and some people are saying it sounds like a 9mm, or maybe I think 9mm makes sense. I don't know what the intention of the driver was, but they drove by and they fired several shots at the property. And so we haven't been there in quite some time. We don't know exactly what our plan is going to be. Right now, the crew is still operating at the Rumble Studios in Florida. But where we operate out of is in the Quad State. It's funny. Technically, you're within a half an hour of PA. We're in West Virginia, next to Maryland and Virginia, and 30 minutes to Pennsylvania too. So it's a hot spot. Washington, D.C., Virginia. We're 30 seconds away from Virginia. Not even a joke. Because we're in the panhandle on the border. What do we do? It's about to get crazy. I mean, it already got crazy. My friends, I wish you the best of luck, and I suggest to you, comment below, smash the like button, share the show with everyone you know. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, because it's crazy out there. All right, everybody, thanks for hanging out. Come back for IRL tonight. Guest celebrity hosts all day. Smash that like button, like I said, 8 p.m., and we will see you all next time.